And welcome back to another Econ podcast with Mr. Hagan. And on this podcast, we are going to talk about our first economic model, which is called the Production Possibilities Model. The Production Possibilities Model. And this is kind of our introductory model to help us understand in general how economists use models. And the first thing that we always do when we develop a model is we come up with a list of assumptions. Now remember that assumptions are things that we are going to pretend are true even though they're not. They are things that we are going to pretend that are true even though they are not true. And we pretend that things are true even if they're not to simplify the world. We want to simplify economics because the world's a very complex place. And so we want to simplify things and make it easier to understand. And then later on, we will drop these assumptions. When we want to get more complex, we will drop the assumptions, which essentially means that we will stop pretending. We will drop the assumptions. So the first assumption, let's just go through our list of assumptions for the production possibilities model. The first assumption, the first thing we're going to pretend to be true even though it's not, is we are going to pretend that resources are fixed. Now, what do I mean by resources? Well, remember there are 4 resources at our disposal to satisfy our wants and desires here on Earth, and they are land. I'm using N to represent land because I'm going to use L to represent labor, K to represent capital, and ES to represent entrepreneurial skills. In other words, we have 4 resources that we can use to maximize our utility, and they are land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurial skills. Now, why did I put these bars over top? Well, the bars for me kind of mean constant. These things are going to be held constant, which is another way of saying we're going to hold them fixed. So we're going to pretend that land is fixed, labor is fixed, capital is fixed, and entrepreneurial skills are fixed, even though they're not. Okay, again, this is to simplify, to make the world easier to understand. So let's try to think of an example where this might be kind of true, that land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurial skills are fixed. So the situation that economists usually use to think about the production possibilities model is the story of Robinson Crusoe. So Robinson Crusoe, here's a picture of front of the book. Robinson Crusoe is a book written by Daniel Defoe a long time ago. And in the book, this guy right here, Robinson Crusoe, he gets shipwrecked. He gets trapped on an island by himself, and so now he has to figure out how's he going to survive on this island all by himself. So he is faced with a world of kind of fixed land. All he has is what's on the island. Kind of fixed labor. He only has his own mental and physical abilities. Kind of fixed capital. He has whatever tools that survived the shipwreck, like this gun. And he has kind of fixed entrepreneurial skills, his own ability to use land, labor, and capital. So he's on this island with fixed, pretty close to, fixed land, labor, capital, entrepreneurial skills. In other words, fixed resources. Number 2, we're going to assume fixed technology. So technology is going to be, we're going to assume is hold fixed. That's clearly not true in the real world. Technology changes rapidly, but we're going to pretend that it's fixed. Okay, and that would be kind of true in Robinson Crusoe's world. We're also going to assume productive efficiency. I will talk about this later on and explain exactly what that means. And then finally, we're going to assume that there's only 2 goods in the world. Right? Now, again, that's silly. There's obviously more than 2 goods in the world, but we are going to assume that there are only 2 goods. And the 2 goods that we are going to assume exist for Robinson Crusoe are guns and butter. Now, why guns and butter of all things? Well, because we generally assume that for any society to continue to thrive, they have to have protection. They need guns, and they need food, which is represented by butter. Okay, so we got this guy, Robinson Crusoe. He's trapped on this island all by himself. He has fixed land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurial skills. He has fixed technology, and he can produce two goods with his resources. Okay, with these resources, he can produce two goods: guns and butter. And on the next podcast, we are going to look at how Robinson Crusoe will make these decisions. And that's how we'll learn about ourselves. How do we make decisions? What should Crusoe produce? Should he produce guns, or should he produce butter, or a combination of the two? And remember, his ultimate goal, as he thinks about this, his ultimate goal is to maximize utility. His ultimate goal is to maximize, get a Z on here. His ultimate goal is to maximize utility. That's what Robinson Crusoe and the rest of us, that's what we're trying to do. So we will, on the next podcast, look at how Robinson Crusoe tries to maximize his utility, choosing between guns and butter. We'll look at that in the next podcast. Thanks for joining me. This has been Mr. Hagen. See you on the next podcast.